Okay, it's now 6 o'clock. Call the meeting to order. The Village of Sayward respectfully acknowledges we gathered here on the land of the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, traditional keepers of this land. Public question period. Public question period is for the purpose of permitting people in the gallery to provide feedback shall be no longer than 15 minutes unless approved by the majority vote of council. Each speaker may provide a respectful comment on any topic they deem appropriate, not necessarily on the agenda or topics on the agenda of the meeting. Each speaker may not speak longer than 2 minutes, but may have a second opportunity if time permits. Each speaker may not be allowed to speak in regarding a bylaw in respect to which a public hearing has been held. For the record, please state your name and address. No. Okay, introduction of late items. None. Approval of agenda. That the agenda for the committee of the whole meeting for February 17th, 2026 be approved as presented.
I'll move that as presented.
Second.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Polson, I can't see you. Are you opposed or in favor?
In favor.
Thank you. Motion's carried. Petition delegations, none. Correspondence, none. Council reports, none. Report on committees, none. Mayor's report, none. Unfinished business, none. Staff reports, draft financial plan for the 2026 to 2030 in progress. Number 1 is report to council on draft financial plan 2026-2030. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. As we all know, this evening, there's a presentation of the draft 2026-2030 financial plan for the Village of Sayward. I'm going to be turning the microphone over in a moment to Jeannie Bradburn, who is a CPA and has a long and distinguished career actually in local government. Has worked for the regional district of Nanaimo for a good number of years and is now working private consultancy. I think it's Pacific Coastal Consultants. Before Ms. Bradburn presents the draft budget to you, I'd like to point out a couple of things. One is there is some pain. I think this needs to be recognized. There is some pain in this proposed budget. At the same time, I will also say that this has been a long time developing. Ms. Bradburn will be able to answer, I think, most of your questions, but I will say that this is not entirely the doing of this council or the previous council. This is the doing of many successive councils that have brought us to this point today. I've done some fairly careful financial analysis of my own, and I can see that over the course of many years, there has been a gradual whittling away of various grants that the provincial government has provided not only to this community, but to other communities in general. This is unsustainable, both for Sayward, but it's also unsustainable for a lot of other small local governments around British Columbia as well. Needless to say, though, what is before you tonight, I think, is a proper, thoughtful path forward for the Village of Sayward. You need, however, and you will find this out from Ms. Bradburn in a few minutes, you need to stay the course and you need to be disciplined. There were some comments that were made in the spring of 2025 by the then interim CAO, John Thomas. At that time, he explained to the council, he said that what you are faced with is a mathematical problem. That was true then, and it's true today. Some hard decisions have been taken by the council already. For example, the closure of programs in the Kelsey Recreation Center. I know that that was not something that was necessarily popular. And speaking for myself, I know that recreation programs are much valued in just about any community. However, it was, in my opinion, the correct decision for the council to take. You need to right the ship. You need to get the books in order. I may have a few things to say a little bit later on, but at this point, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Ms. Bradburn. Thank you.
That's all right for you guys.
That's perfect.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me tonight, and thank you for the lovely introduction, and thank you for welcoming to your community. I had the pleasure of meeting a few residents already, and everyone seems incredibly friendly. So it is a true pleasure to be here this evening. A little bit about myself. My name is Jeannie Bradburn. I am a fully designated accountant. I am a CGA CPA. I also have my MBA. I've worked in local government for almost 20 years, and I've been a financial officer for a variety of different local governments and regional districts before starting consulting, and I've been consulting for about 5 years now. So a little bit about my background. So thank you for having me in presenting the 2026 to 2030 financial plan. I'll try my best to answer all the questions that you might have. Obviously, there might be a few just being a consultant that we might have to go back and find answers for, and we'll certainly bring those back to you. That's with this mouse. A little bit of a disclaimer here. It just says that the contents of this presentation is for the information and discussion purposes only, as the village prepares its 5-year financial plan. The information within is not the final budget and is subject to change based on the direction of council. So a little bit what we will go over this evening, we'll look at the budget timeline. We're going to look at the legislative requirements, a little bit roles and responsibilities, where our current financial position is. Then we're going to go over the financial plan overview, some key assumptions, sort of some of the key cost drivers and financial pressures that we are seeing. And then we'll look at what that sort of brings us to, what the proposed tax rate and fee changes are, and looking at next steps. So the timeline, obviously this evening, we're presenting to the committee of the whole the first draft of the 2026 financial plan. There's 2 more meetings coming up, March.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Apparently the public can't hear. Is that correct? Everybody can hear?
I can try to speak a
You
little
can.
bit louder.
Okay, thank you.
Try that.
Sorry.
And then we're going to come back. So there's 2 more meeting dates scheduled right now. So March 17th and March 31st. So like I say, if there's any questions coming out of the meeting this evening, there will be opportunities to come back and address those. Then we are looking at having the first 3 readings on April 14th and finally adoption on April 28th. So looking at what is council's role in the budget process. So certain things that council is responsible for, you are responsible for approving a 5-year financial plan. It has to be done by bylaw. Looking at setting the service levels as well as what the community priorities are. We need to approve an annual tax rate bylaw. And then we need to make sure that the budget aligns with your strategic priorities of your organization, and then looking at providing oversight and ensuring financial stability. And then finally, representing the interest of the community. So certain things that you're not responsible for that become staff is they're responsible for these. So actually preparing of your financial statements, as well as preparing of your financial plan and dealing with any of your sort of day-to-day operations. So key thing is council is going to set the direction and then staff are going to implement it. So looking at the legislative requirements, so as a municipality, you guys fall under the community charter. So the community charter does dictate what is required in the financial plan. So every year you have to adopt a balanced 5-year financial plan. You cannot have a financial plan that is in a deficit position. So if there are any expenditures, it does have to be fully funded. So that brings us to the next thing. We have to ensure total expenditures do not exceed total funding. There has to be some form of public consultation before adoption. This is not defined anywhere in the legislation, and the public consultation piece does vary greatly from one local government to another. My understanding is the process here is that we do have open meetings where this is being considered, and the public does have the ability to speak at these meetings as well as provide any written comments to the village should they wish. Then we have to adopt an annual tax rate bylaw. That bylaw has to get adopted after the financial plan is adopted. And then we have to ensure financial decisions, they are transparent and they're accountable. So a key thing here that is very important to be mindful of with your current financial situation, we'll go over this a little bit more this evening, is you cannot have a deficit. Right now, and this is how most municipalities operate, is you essentially have three funds. You have your general fund, and then you have your utilities funds, your water and sewer. Right now, your general fund is in a deficit position. Your water and sewer have a surplus. So overall, you have a net surplus position as an organization still. If that is to change and you fall into a deficit position, the law is clear. You have to tax for that deficit in the following year. It is not optional. So very important to consider that as we're considering the financial plan for 2026, because should things not be adequately funded and you end up falling into a deficit at the end of 2026, it will become mandatory to tax for that amount in 2027. So looking at some key budget decisions and things to sort of keep in mind as we go through this. So looking at things of what service level do you want to provide? What capital projects are we looking at prioritizing? How much do you want to contribute to reserves? Whether or not to borrow to fund infrastructure? And then looking at how do we fund things? Or, you know, for you say your utilities, are we going to fund that with a parcel tax or a user fee? Do we fund capital from reserves? How are we looking at that? And then finally, we're going to talk about this a little bit tonight as well, but how is that tax burden distributed between property classes? Just in case people are not aware, BC Assessments determines the value of all the properties throughout BC, and there's 9 different classes. The 2 most common is Class 1's residential, Class 6 is commercial or business class, and we'll go over that later this evening, but part of the decision that every council needs to make every year is how taxes get distributed between those classes. So we're going to look at 2025 a little bit and what has happened. So 2025, the following projects were completed. They ended up doing a lawnmower replacement project for parks, a boiler replacement project at the Kelsey Recreation Center. You have a new successful recruitment of a CAO, so that is wonderful. And then also it says the support of the community group activities at the Kelsey Recreation Center due to various council approved grants and aid. So 2025 was not without some challenges. Obviously, there is a lot of staffing limitations. So some things could not be completed. So you had your land use and infrastructure analysis for zoning bylaw modernization. So you had a grant for 123,000 that ended up being canceled because there was no staff capacity to deal with it. So those funds have been returned. There was the Kelsey Center Air Conditioning Project, the Cooling Center for Extreme Heat Events. That was a $72,000 grant, and that also had to be canceled because there was staff constraints. And then we have the Macmillan Drainage Project, so that one is in progress. And then we have the Economic Development Capacity Building Project. That was 100,000, and that one we have a note that it has not started. Is that correct, or did it start at the very end of 2025?
It's not started.
It's not started yet. So some other projects that have not been started or are currently incomplete. We still have the OCP, your official community plan. We have a joint funding agreement with your regional district for regional services, an agreement with Western Forest Products regarding log sort operations, long-term infrastructure replacement strategy, the second phase of working waterfront project, your water meter bylaw, your community forest, your revitalization of the community garden, and tourism initiatives. So then looking at some more challenges in 2026 and things that came up that ended up being unbudgeted for, or so that they became additional expenditures because there were some staffing challenges. We did have some staffing changes during there, and that results in some additional costs where you have consultants coming in, additional contract labor, things like that. There were some unforeseen legal costs that occurred during the year. And I will note anything to do with legal, obviously, client solicitor, no further details are going to be able to be provided on it. And then there was emergency repairs to critical infrastructure that also happened during the year. So this slide, I think, is one of the key slides to look at in this whole presentation because it really tells a story. You'll see on the left, you're going to see 3 different colors. I was talking about the different funds that you have. The green is your general fund that covers pretty much everything that's not utilities in your community. The purple is your sewer and blue is your water. You can see the level of surplus that you had back in 2020, 2021 was not too bad. And you can see that consistently dropping every single year. And so what that tells me is that we have consistently been spending more than the revenue that's coming in, and it's a pattern over time. And so that definitely feeds into some of the challenges that we're going to see in the 2026 budget for a variety of reasons. One, we can see, okay, well, we've been underfunding by a decent amount every single year. We need to address that and start funding it. The other thing is, because you can see the green is now negative, we don't have any surplus left at all in the general fund. Best practice states to have at least 2 months of operating reserves or operating surplus because there's always unforeseen events. And in 2026, we do have some one-off expenditures that generally, coming in, I would recommend we use surplus to fund that because it's a one-time expense. In this situation, because there is no surplus left, that is not an option. So that really only leaves us with the option of looking at funding it from property taxes. So you see, it has been for about 5 years now, we see that decline over time. And as I cautioned you right now, so ended 2025, this is an estimate, 2025 statements have not been complete, you're down to 72,000. If that turns negative, then like I say, it's not optional. It has to get added on to the taxes the following year. So there's a real risk that that could happen in 2026. Another key thing to look at is your reserve levels. So you can see sort of a similar trend where your reserve levels have decreased over time. You see a little bit of an uptick in 2025. When we look at reserves, we look at 2 types. We look at operating reserves as well as your capital reserves. In your case, for the operating reserves, there essentially is no money set aside. There's a small amount every year that gets put aside for the election, and we're going to see that in 2026 come out. So what you do is instead of suddenly having a big tax increase in the year of an election, you take a quarter of that, you tax it every year, you set it aside into the reserves, and then you use it. So it helps stabilize your taxes, which is great. But we really don't have any other operating reserves. And again, why we want to have those is sometimes we have unforeseen events, right? You might have a year where you have a ton of snowfall you suddenly have to deal with, or some unexpected thing comes up, maybe something breaks, but it's maintenance, it's not capital. It is nice to have those dollars so that you don't have to then try to fund it some other way. On the capital side, there is some funds set aside. I will say the funding right now is all coming from external grants. And because it's coming from external grants, there's restrictions on it. So when you get that grant money coming from the government, they're going to say you can use this for XYZ, and that's the only thing you can use it for. So it's not as flexible if you put the money aside yourself. It is great that we do have some money set aside for capital, but like I say, it is limited. And I think it's really important to bring up as well, right now on your general side, there's no money included in the budget going for capital. There's nothing going into your capital reserves. That might not be something to address in 2026, knowing 2026 is going to be a very challenging budget year. But I think it is very important to keep that in mind in the future years, that at some point you're going to end up with a massive infrastructure deficit, because every year your infrastructure gets older and older. And if you're not putting that money aside, you're going to be in that position where if something suddenly fails, how are you going to fund it? And then you can sometimes see a big fluctuation in spikes for property taxes over the year, because if something breaks, you have to tax for it in that 1 year versus gradually putting it aside. So that is just something to consider in future years. There is a small amount going to reserve in water and sewer included in the budget. And so, sorry, there's two slides back to back. This one includes more of the capital, so you can see it. And you'll see the three main reserves that you have money. You have your Community Works Fund, your gas tax, you have your Climate Action, and you have your Growing Communities Fund. Those are all grant money funded. So like I say, all three of those do have restrictions on them. So again, how did we arrive at the current situation? So obviously, as we could see that downward trend of your surplus, we did have multiple years where those expenditures exceeded revenue. And so then what happened is all that accumulated surplus ended up getting used up to fund that operation. So that we have to deal with, we have to fund that as well as other items coming up. And because now we basically don't have any surplus left, we have a little bit in water and sewer. You know, that's facing some challenges. So when we're looking at a minimum, and this is a minimum best practice is 2 months, you're around 350,000. It's ideally what we want to have in that surplus or an operating reserve for things that might come up. And then we have obviously like our reserves that we do have, those capital reserves, they're restricted. They've come from grant money. We cannot use that to fund operations. So a couple of the guiding documents that came into the development of this plan is obviously looking at your 2025, your actuals, as well as your projections, looking at your organization's strategic plan, and then looking at your asset management strategy and policy, your reserve policy, HR and payroll policies, and then input from any of the department managers, and obviously our restrictions within the Community Charter and Local Government Act. So a couple items that were included in 2026 to make note of. So we have some safety upgrades. So in the water, sewer, as well as operating side, there's some PPE as well as occupational health and safety items that need to be addressed, as well as training for staff. We also have a part-time bylaw enforcement officer. When we went through and reviewed the budget in detail, looking for any potential, say, deferment or cost savings, one of the items that did come up was this part-time bylaw enforcement officer and the ability to defer that to 2027. So in the version that you are seeing right now, they are listed as 2027. Then there was council agenda preparation software that was also deferred to 2027. And then we have a public works manager. And so we're looking at deferring that to mid-year. So by the time that could actually be posted and fulfilled, we're looking at funding it mid-year. And then the rest of that funding would come in 2027. Then we have some like parks equipment and maintenance. Then there was some legal consulting contract labor, and then recruitment costs as well for various staff vacancies, and then some contingency. So why is an increase required? So like right now, obviously, we've had experience multiple years where your expenses have exceeded that revenue. And because now we don't have any accumulated surplus, that's not an option. So really that leaves us only with property tax to look at. The community charter does require that we have a balanced budget. And so like I say, now we have to look at going, okay, well, how do we fund our operating costs through recurring revenues? And then we have infrastructure safety and legislative compliance requirements. Those have to be addressed. And then the proposed increase reflects the minimum required to restore financial stability and ensure continued delivery of essential services. So where does that get us to? So taxation right now as a starting point was prepared with a 50% increase to property taxes. After we've gone through and done a thorough review, we were able to reduce that to 42%. Obviously, I know that is going to be a difficult number for people to see. Going through your budget, there's very limited options for other ways that we can find revenue or reduced expenditures. It is definitely, it's a challenging year. And like I said, we've seen it coming for years, right? We see it for the last 5 years where, okay, we're going through all of our surplus. And now we've sort of run out of those options. For 2027, we're looking at a 14% increase. And then on the utility side, sewer for the user fee, we're looking at a 5%, and that would be a 10% next year. Water would be 25%, 15% next year. And then solid waste, there's no increase. So looking at some things, so did we skip a slide? Um, so for 2026, obviously, like I said, we had to look at going, okay, we need to have a balanced budget. For the water and sewer, we did resume that reserve contribution. There is no reserve contribution on the general side, and that reserve contribution had been stopped in 2025 for water and sewer, so that's why it resumes that. They are looking at pulling in 55,000 from the Growing Communities Fund Reserve to help offset some of the cost on the water and sewer operating side. And then the other key thing here when we look at the service level adjustments would be the continued cancellation of the Kelsey Recreation Center programming. So what does this sort of work out to? So when we look at the municipal tax side, for an average home, we're looking about $725 per year, or about $60 per month. For the sewer, it's about $19 a year or $2 a month increase. Water is about $121 per year or $10 a month, and solid waste has no increase. So overall, for an average home, it's about an $865 increase or about $72 a month. And then when we look at, okay, what are some of the key drivers for that budget? And we do have some legal costs coming in 2026. We do have some work safe orders and mandatory safety compliance requirements that we do have to follow. Like I say, there's been that reliance on surpluses and reserves in prior years, which are now depleted, and now we do have to fund that shortfall. We've seen some staffing gaps requiring contract labor and consulting support. And then we have this old obsolete equipment and aging infrastructure that needs to be dealt with. Some increasing insurance premiums, your COLA, and then sort of your inflation and increased costs of supplies and materials. So looking at how do we reduce the increase to municipal taxes and user fees, we can look at how do we increase our revenue, how do we decrease our expense, or how do we do a combination of both. So looking at options for reducing the increase for the municipal taxes and user fees. This is just potential things to look at, obviously to varying different degrees of ability. So to create new internal revenue sources, such as a frontage or parcel tax, water meters, parks and recreation programs, including campgrounds, increased fees and charges, new developments such as growth, which then leads to non-market change. I'll say if people don't know what non-market changes, again, we get back to BC assessment assesses every property in BC. When we have new development, that's called non-market change. So if you have a new home that gets built in your community, it's called non-market change. And why it's important when we go to calculate taxes is we go, the existing taxpayers are going to fund the costs related to them, and then you're going to have essentially development fund development. So the increased cost to your community from having that development, they end up paying for it. Looking at provincial and federal grants or other grants available, looking at your regional district contributions for shared services, such as the Kelsey Center, Health Clinic, or age-friendly van. Operating budget reductions or costs. I believe to pretty much every extent that has been done with the closure of the Kelsey Center. Additional use of reserves. Again, though, in your case, most are restricted or already earmarked for current or future projects. And then use of surpluses. So that is not really an option for 2026 because there's no surplus in the general fund, or looking at service level cuts and staff layoffs. So what I say, when staff went through, did a very thorough review of looking at any potential savings. 3 items were identified with the recommendation to push these off to 2027. So the agenda preparation software would defer that to 2027. The Public Works Manager, and note the Public Works Manager spends some of the time working in water and sewer. So this is just their tax funded portion of that. But that position would get pushed to start July 1st for funding it. And then the bylaw enforcement manager would get delayed until 2027. I do want to talk about the tax rate multiples. And so again, we get back to, we have 9 different property classes. And so what a tax rate multiple is, you may have heard it called a tax rate ratio. They're the exact same thing, is the ratio of the tax rate that is any of those classes in relation to the residential class. So for example, if the ratio was 3, they would pay 3 times the rate as the residential class. It is council's decision every year to consider that and to determine should there be any change to how taxes get allocated. provided. You do have full legal authority to set those however you want. That has been determined in court. So there's no question on your ability to do so. So it will not impact the total taxes collected, but it will impact how it gets allocated to the various classes. So right now, your current tax multiple, so obviously your residential class is always 1 because it's residential to residential. But to give you an idea here, so your business class is 6.26, which means a business property is going to pay 6.26 times the residential class's rate. Managed forest did see an increase last year, and so we do have that at 100. And then you have your recreation nonprofit is 2.22. One of the things I did want to talk about tonight, because obviously, as much as we can see the trend in the history of going, okay, we've been going through surplus, sort of like the writing's been on the wall for the few years of going, at some point we need to have a tax increase. I would still expect a lot of people will not necessarily be expecting the level of increase that we're showing this evening. And so a couple of things that I did want to talk about is some options for council to consider, as well as for the public to be aware of. One of them is when we do set the bylaw, so you do a tax rate bylaw every year, you have 2 options under the community charter. And so the standard is that July 2nd is the due date. And if you don't pay on time, then you see a 10% penalty the next day. There's something called an alternative scheme. It has to be more advantageous than that July 2nd and 10%. There's a decent number of municipalities in the province that do elect to use that. Most of them stick with the July 2nd due date. Some go a day or 2 later, but generally stick with the July 2nd. But what they do is, instead of having a 10% penalty, is they reduce that amount, and then the balance of that 10% will be later in the year. So for example, they'll make it so it's like taxes are due July 2nd, but you'll have a 2% penalty. And then the remaining 8% will become due a couple months later. And it's essentially a way to give residents longer to come in and pay their taxes, and they don't see so much of that penalty right away. So that is something to consider, that if, residents were not expecting this, they may need longer to kind of come up with that plan of how do we come up with that money to pay their taxes. You could always look at amending when that 10% penalty applies.
Is that 10% a provincial law or?
So there's, like I say, there's 2 options. So the standard is under the community charter. It does stipulate that it's July 2nd and 10%. The alternative scheme, it does not have to be 10%. I haven't seen a local government yet not have it add up to 10%. Like I say, most will do like a 2 or 5 on July 2nd, and then the remaining of it might be September 1st or the end of September, or even November, December, where that applies. So you're essentially just giving people longer to come in. So if they aren't able to come up with the funds for July, or if they forget, they don't see such the same level of penalty. For your organization, your total revenue that you see from that penalty is around $6,000. So even if you elected to do this, the amount of revenue would be fairly minimal. I don't think you would see more than a couple thousand at the max that you would decrease from that penalty. And like I say, it just gives people that option to give them more time.
Thank you.
So the other thing I want to talk about is the provincial tax deferment program. So this is not operated by the village, is not operated by any municipality. It's done by the province. It is an absolute fantastic program that I would encourage everyone to talk to the financial professionals to consider. There are certain requirements. You do have to own your home, and there's 2 different main categories. So if you're a senior, which is 55 or over, or if you're a person with children, it also applies to anyone with a disability, you have the ability to defer your taxes. It becomes a very low interest rate program. So if you're in the regular program, which is for seniors 55 and over, is prime less 2%. So you end up paying a very low interest rate, which is simple interest. And so what happens is, in your community, say you have a lot of seniors and they go, well, I have a pension. They may not have a lot of cash coming in, but over time, the value of their home generally goes up to a considerable amount. So what they can do is they can defer their taxes every year. And then when they go to sell their house, that's when the taxes become due. But like I say, it's very low interest the whole time, that simple interest. And it just gives them that extra cash flow during the time as well. And just with your situation, I just wanted to point that out to residents as well. So if anyone happens to feeling that stress of going, well, okay, if we're looking at a significant tax increase that they weren't necessarily budgeting for this year, that is something for them to consider. Okay. Yeah.
You have to turn off your microphone for a moment.
Oh,
Thank you.
sorry. Thank you. So important to state that, utilities are not part of that deferment, but as I understand it, there is a way, is there, to have that included?
Yes, so very good point. So you can only defer taxes, you cannot defer user fees. User fees do have to be paid in full. So right now, you do have your water and sewer as a user fee. However, because in your community you don't have water meters, there's no way to know how much people use, which means everyone gets a flat rate. So it's very easy to be able to convert that into a parcel tax instead. And if you had it as a parcel tax, then people would have the ability to defer that. So that is something to consider in future years if you want to do that. And I have had a conversation with your CAO about that option as well. So looking at sort of next steps. So we're looking for council's discussion on those sort of goals and objectives for the remainder of the term or for the remainder of the year, and then direction to staff on possible modifications to the budget for the next committee of the whole meeting, including any direction on current municipal taxes and user fees or any changes that are desired. Then we're looking at council's discussion on service levels, any possible changes. The discussion regarding the future programming at the Kelsey Recreation Center. Options to address prior year deficits and a path forward fiscal sustainability. And then staff to refine the budget based on the council direction. And then we'll be looking at coming back, including looking at your 2025 variance reporting a little bit more versus actuals at the next committee of the whole meeting, which is March 17th, as well as looking at your capital expenditures. Right now, I believe there's just one capital project in the 5-year plan that we're aware of that we're looking at.
Mayor Baker, I was just asked by Ms. Bradburn, in past years, has the finance officer gone through these sheets in detail with you?
Only when questions were asked.
Go to the end and we can always come back. Okay, and are there any questions?
Councillor Coates?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is frontage tax. Could you explain that a little bit, please? Because last year I know when I had discussions with the CFO, she mentioned that we could, about the frontage tax. And she kind of explained it, I might have gotten it wrong, but it's any parcel of land that isn't been built on, but water and sewer is available to that property. And right now we're not taxing that on the lots that are sitting empty. Thank you.
So we have a variety of options when we look at, okay, when we have a utility like water or sewer, how do we want to recover the cost of providing that service? And generally we look at that sort of two different ways. Often we look at having a parcel tax or a flat amount that covers the capital cost. So for example, you're putting the pipe in the ground down the street, whether someone's connected or not, they have the ability to connect. And so you're going to charge them. And like I say, usually that's going, okay, everyone has a flat amount. That can be done in a variety of ways. It can be done as a flat user fee, or it can be done as a parcel tax. When we look at a parcel tax, there's a variety of ways to do it. We can do a flat amount, so every home pays the same amount. We can do it called like your frontage parcel tax. So like depending on how long your front of the property is, where that pipe passes along, because obviously if you have a bigger property, they have to put essentially more pipe in to get to your home. And then we can look at it sort of like on a zoning side of things. So the most common with parcel tax is generally everyone pays the same amount. So it'll be like $500 per year, every home pays that, and that covers the cost of that pipe. And then often what we see is a user fee, and that ties into, well, how much are people using? So if someone's not connected, they're not going to pay a user fee. If they are connected, they do. Having said that, without having it as a tax, having it as a fee, you do see some places that will have a base amount. So again, that's a way to ensure everyone is paying a base amount for that service, whether they connect or not, because they have the ability to connect.
So there's no way to charge vacant properties more money.
No, there certainly is. So, if we're looking at switching from a user fee to a parcel tax, 2027 is going to have to be your first year. And the reason is you actually have to create a role. A role is essentially a listing of every single property and then going, what's their assessed value. So you actually have to create a parcel tax role. There's a process to that. It's not that big of an undertaking, but you're not going to be able to, like, per the legislation, you won't have it in place till 2027. So you certainly can go and have that in place where if there's, like, say, if it goes by someone's home, they have the ability to connect, you can charge that for 2027 as a parcel tax. On the user side, I'm not familiar with your utilities user fee bylaws, but I can go and have a look there. And like I say, it's not unusual where you'll have certain homes that have a base amount. So you'll have to ensure that there's wording in that bylaw, though, that says if you have the ability to connect, you will be charged the base amount. And then the question is going, like, say in your community, you don't have a water meter. How are you necessarily going to know how much people are using? But you might have data that says, okay, we're going to have it as essentially 2 steps. So everyone pays the base amount, whether you're connected or not, because you have the ability to connect. And then we're going to have another charge for everyone who is connected. And you just have to have that wording in your bylaw. So there is, so if you do have a large number of homes that are not connected but have the ability to, you do have the ability to look at starting to charge them.
There's question period at the end. Thank you. Councillor Coates?
Thank you. I may be jumping ahead, but any report, and then you did mention it in a slide, $725 annually more for residential. And you said it's based on an average house. So what is this based on? What is the average home that this figure was based on? Like, is it 300,000, but somebody that's paying assessment is 600,000 is going to be paying twice as much as that. And I kind of want the public to know that, so they're not saying, oh, well, I thought my taxes were only going up 200 or 725, and now my bill is like twice as much because of my assessed value of my home.
I will have to pull up what your average is, but I can do that and get back to you by the end of this evening. The other thing we can look at doing is when this comes back March 17th, is we can list what that equates to per 100,000 of assessment. So again, if someone has a $500,000 home or $1 million home, they can just multiply it by that amount, and then that will give them a better idea of where it will be. It is important to note that right now that calculation was done with existing multiples. So again, that tax multiple is how we're allocating the taxes to the different classes. Should council wish to amend that in any way, it will also impact the portion that then gets allocated out to the residents. So just to be aware that that could further be amended, whether up or down, depending if a decision is made to look at adjusting any of the tax multiples.
Councillor Johnson?
Thank you. Just in regards to process here tonight, I do have questions, but they're surrounding some of the more detailed information, the numbers. So are we wanting to explore that during the course of this meeting, or is that something for future meetings?
I think if this is council's meeting, so Ms. Bradburn is here tonight. She'll be attending the next 2 meetings virtually. So I think if you do have questions, this would be an ideal time to raise them. To point out, though, we might not necessarily have answers to all of your questions tonight, but if we don't have answers tonight, we'll certainly make note of the questions, and then we'll investigate them and bring material back for you for the 17th of March. So feel free.
Go ahead.
And then if I may, I've got a few, and again, not expecting answers, and sometimes it's just flagging council for things to think about. So, and I apologize, I've got much more detailed information here, But I'll be going off the staff report. So on page 17, we do list travel and education. That's something that council previously decided to not do to save funds. I'd like to flag that for council consideration again. It looks like that is well worth a discussion. Admin grants on page 18. I do notice that we have nothing allocated in the years past 2026. So just wondering if there are grants in relation to that particular line?
For those particular grants, those were one-off grants. There are some ongoing grants, and it is a different page, and I'm afraid I don't know exactly what page it is. It's going to be your very first or second page with these documents, whereas revenue, there are some ongoing grants that you will see continuing there. So like you have a small communities grants, but the one that you were seeing under admin, those were one-time grants. There is a small amount of those where the money hasn't been spent yet, so it's being set aside in deferred revenue. And then once those projects will be completed, we'll add that expenditure to the budget, and then we're going to add the associated grant revenue.
Go ahead.
Okay. And just on that same page, we do have admin salaries and wages, which is in conjunction with contract wages on the following page, page 19. So I do note that, you know, we definitely had contract labor in 2025. No way around that. We are budgeting 120,000 for this year going forward. And I'm just wondering, and again, this doesn't need an answer now, but it will need some discussion around, you know, we're obviously operating right now without the permanent position of CFO. And then there's that impacts contract. So I just want to make sure that we've got that balance there between the two. And on page 19, I do note that there's no allocated spend for ECDev. We did have a budget line previously for grant writing. We do, to my understanding, have a grant for ECDev. So I'm just wondering if we're allocating spends again, because I don't see a spend line there.
So there is an item for grant writing for a consultant to do that, but you have a different line item, and it's for like consulting services. I'm trying to find the exact wording of it. And that is where it's under. And I think it's 25,000 a year, but I can confirm that.
St. Councillor, my understanding is there is a grant, $100,000 that the village received a year or so ago. The purpose of that grant, as it was initially scoped, was to hire on a contract basis an economic development coordinator. And that did not happen in 2025 because of various changeovers amongst both the CIOs. At the same time, I think it should be recognized that there's opportunities to potentially repurpose and rescope that grant. Not knowing exactly what that might be, but we still have over a year left to use that money. And so it is $100,000 of money that can be put to use. But again, back to Ms. Bradburn's point, it is earmarked for particular uses. So we can't pull it into general operating.
That a rescope, sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I apologize again. So I bring your attention to page 22, and again, this is going to require really taking a look at it. But I note some of the costs that are allocated to the Kelsey Center now running on in a limited way. We've got information technologies at 3,500. We've got dues and subscriptions at 500 across. We've got office supplies allocated. chemicals in the pool, I do understand that until a permanent decision is there. We've got contract labor, which I understand, and then we've got to decide what we're going to do for telephone and internet. The biggest one, though, I think is insurance, and I'm not sure if if we can have some kind of cost savings now that the activity is diminished, or each user is responsible for their own insurance. So I think, that's something that we'll want to take a look at. And then obviously, heating and utilities is quite high. Again, that the building is obviously heated on propane. So, this gets back to grants and seeing what else we can do to change that. But the whole purpose of this, why I'm bringing these things up, is, office supplies and other lines like that with a center that we're no longer sort of operating in that way. There might be some savings there.
If I may, Mr. Mayor. So your insurance property will not decrease. So essentially what that is should something happen to that building. So whether it's operating or not, that cost will be the same. In a way, if absolutely no one was in the building, potentially that insurance cost would actually increase. The one that would potentially decrease, like say, is that liability insurance. It is not a large dollar line item. And I think until that point where that decision has been made, you will see for the bottom two, the heating, fuel, and the utilities. If you look at the 2025 budget amount, which is your second column, versus 2026 budget, they do decrease substantially. They decrease by about half. My understanding is a portion of that building will be continued to be used in some form. So there will likely be some ongoing heating costs associated with that. But we are seeing a bit of that savings in the budget.
Any other questions, Councillor Johnson? Just a sec. Okay, we'll go with Councillor Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you please pull up slide appendix 2026 financial plan operating version 1 detailed? It's here 1, 2, 3, 4 slides in your Excel. Sorry, into the spreadsheet. One more. One more.
Service it was for?
Sorry.
At the very top, you say like, what it say like, where government, does it say like?
It's expenditures. Pardon me? No, it's just the financial operating for all expenditures from 2026 to 2023. Or appendix from 2026 to 2023. Yeah, right there. Thank you. No one else is talking about it, so I'm going to talk about it. When something's unsustainable, things fail. So if we look at our legal costs, we budget $90,000 for 2025. Actual rate now, $259,000 on legal expenses. The projection, over $300,000 in 1 year of your tax dollars on legal. It's absurd, unsustainable, and that's what's failing. This is why this council has failed this community, making the wrong decisions. The majority of council is putting money into things that aren't building community. This isn't a good look for Sayward.
Okay,
Can you please ask this person?
did you stop?
This is
First,
Can you please ask her to leave?
Yeah.
He wasted $30,000 of my strata money.
Have a good night. So here we are, last couple of years, $500,000 of your tax money not going to the Kelsey Center, not going to programs for seniors, not going to after-school care for children. It's absurdity.
Can you get right to the point, please?
The
You've
point
been
is,
going on long enough.
the majority of this council has made the poorest decisions and failed our constituents. We're asking our
You already said
constituent,
that.
we're asking our constituents for a 50% tax increase. How does that marginalize for the rest of Canada? It's absolutely absurd. It's unfair in our constituents.
Well, you're right about
Poor
one thing.
administration, poor governance has led to
Okay.
this.
That's enough, Councillor Bichette.
Zero leadership has led to this.
That's enough, Councillor Bichette, or you'll be asked to leave the meeting.
Speaking the truth. That's all I'm doing.
That's not what you're doing.
I'm speaking the
You're
truth.
exaggerating the truth.
$300,000
know the truth if
of
you came up
legal
with what you
money
did.
is not exaggerating. It's black and white on this spreadsheet.
Yeah, well, where did that money's come from? And why was it spent?
Yeah, I guess we'll find that out, but it's these people in
think we
front of
should-
me that we have to
No,
answer
let's
to.
ask.
It's their money.
How many complaints have you put in?
Excuse me,
I'm
I've had my hand up for about 10 minutes.
Sorry, I couldn't see you. I can't see anybody on screen because of the presentation. Over 14 complaints.
I can see myself. I
Yeah,
can
we-
see
we
you.
can't
and
Those
see you.
I
complaints, almost
I
none of
think
them have been addressed. Sorry,
this-
Councillor Paulson.
This is about a budget discussion. And if I have permission to speak, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Thank you. With all due respect, I would like to point out that in previous budget discussions, we have actually gone through all of the spreadsheets and discussed, heard the CFO explain each one, and often questions arose from those things, and she would stop and explain it at that time. So rather than having people just go through and ask about certain issues that they have, I think it would be much better if we went through each of the pages line by line, and if anybody has any questions, they can ask them at that time. That would give the, Miss Brayburn, sorry, I didn't catch your name. Anyway, it would give her an idea of what questions we have, rather than having individual counselors just pick out certain ones. It would also be beneficial, I believe, to all of the people that are attending the meetings, and it could be done at the community meeting also, so that the community can have some input and know exactly what some of these lines are referring to. I know, just for your information, we did put forth a recommendation that the last CFO go through a process of finding out, gathering the information on getting water meters put in. And it was a big job for her, and she came back with the amount of $30,000 it would cost to get the how much it would cost to have that done. And that was in about September or October. And the reasoning for not voting it in by the people who voted against it was that it cost too much money, even though she had allocated money out of the community grant. And it wouldn't have cost the village anything except the money from the grant. So I just wanted to clarify that. And it was suggested that we wait until 2026 to do that. And my suggestion at the time was that if it wasn't done until 2026, then it probably wouldn't be completed until 2027. So that didn't happen. And it's unfortunate because it would have been a more fair and equitable costing for the water usage for the residents, and people that wash their cars 4 times a week would be charged equivalently for that water use. So I would just like to make that point, and I would like to go through the pages of the revenue and expenditures and summary point by point, so that if we or the public have any questions, we can ask them. I'm also wanting to have a look at the admin costs, because we're down a huge amount of staff, and yet the admin budget has goes higher every year in this five-year plan. So I think we need to address those things, and so that the public is aware also of what is going on. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. A question for you, if I may. We talked about deferment, and we talked about the possibility where switching that to a parcel would allow for utilities to be deferred as well. Question to you is if there was a metered structure here, that wouldn't be possible to my understanding. Is that correct?
I'll talk about water meters in general as well. Generally, when you have a water meter, the purpose of that is that you're going to charge more for the higher user. So if someone uses more, they pay more than if someone uses less. The other thing that where water meters come in is if you have a water shortage, which there are communities out there where they do see these critical shortages, particularly in the summer. So it's a way to incentivize residents to use less. They'll do a tiered rate. The more you use, the more you pay. Therefore, people generally use less. However, in most local governments, there's still a core fixed fee for all residents, because like your cost to say your pipe or everything else like that goes into that ground is the cost of that. It's going to last so long. You know, if one resident uses twice the other, they still have to pay for that core pipe, right? Where it's different is when we start looking at going, well, what is the cost to actually like treat and distribute water? So you could very well still have a portion of that fee be a parcel tax. I will say when you look at implementing water meters, it can be quite a large, costly process to do so. It is not easy. I've helped other local governments do it. As much as it sounds like, okay, you're just going to install it at everyone's home, it is quite a process. It's also quite a process to try to figure out, okay, well, how much are people using and setting those fees correctly so that you're actually seeing the revenue that you're expecting in that first year. And the other thing you have to keep in mind is it's not a one-time thing. So even if you got the grant to implement them, the water meter only lasts for so long before it has to get replaced. And then you have to choose how often and how frequently you're going to bill. Are you doing that quarterly? Are you doing it once a year? Then obviously you need the staff to come in, do those meter readings throughout the year, do the billings and taking the payment. So there is additional cost associated with having those water meters. The flip side of that is some communities see the value in it because they're going, okay, it might create more equity or it might create an incentive for people to use less. But when we look at actually the billing of it, yes, you could definitely still have a portion of it be a parcel tax. And I would say that's probably how I see it most frequently, is that you have a base amount as a parcel tax, and then you'll have an additional user fee on top of it. But yeah, if a portion of it's a user fee, then that could not be deferred.
Councillor Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the mayor to the CAO, I've asked before about council resolutions to legal expenditures and overages, and you said previous that you're investigating, and then I asked again, and then you said that you only get direction by council. So I'm going to ask again if we can get the council resolutions for all the legal overages, expenditures, and if they'll be available for the auditors.
That question has been asked and answered several times.
It has
Go
not
ahead.
been answered satisfactory.
Thank you, Mayor Burchett. Pardon me. Thank you, Mayor Baker. To Councillor Burchett. I believe that this question has been answered, perhaps not to your satisfaction, Councillor. However, a decision to waive solicitor-client privilege requires a resolution adopted by a majority of council. Unless a majority of council agrees to waive the privilege and make the information publicly available, which it appears you are trying to do, information that is subject to solicitor-client privilege is also subject to the confidentiality requirements of Section 117 of the Community Charter. If council wishes to see that information in an in-camera meeting, and if council chooses to relinquish privilege over that information and share it with the public, then it would be shared with the public, not otherwise. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the report that Jeannie did, it says between 2020 and 2025, the surplus declined from $850,000 to 72. Where did the majority of that money go? Did it go to the rec center for the deficit? Or were past councils just frivolously spending money, not looking line by line, not questioning variance reports? And it got down to $72,000. That is unbelievable. Whether it was legal, whether it was the rec center, I feel it was very irresponsible from going from $850,000 to 70, which it might even be less than 70 that we have in surplus. Absolutely disgusting. It's not only this table, it's previous tables and previous people that sat here that got us into the situation today, not just this current council. And it's too bad that the audiences weren't like they are tonight, these previous years, and people were watching the finances. Because I know I came to some meetings and I know I asked some hard ass questions, but you're a shit disturber if you ask questions when you're in the audience. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Just taking a look at numbers, and perhaps this is to you, CAO, I'm not sure. The PP&E and OH&S, we're allocating, I think I read 30,000 for that. Is that required, or can we get there another way? Thank you.
Through Mayor Baker to Councillor Johnson. I will not sugarcoat this. The village of Sayward has for many years operated in a manner which is inconsistent with proper WorkSafe practices. Last year, there was a complaint that was made. I'm not sure by who, but in any case, as a result of that complaint, there was a WorkSafe inspector came to the village office and to Public Works. This is before my time. In the short time that that inspector was here, they found a couple of things that, in their opinion, were low-hanging fruit that needed to be addressed very quickly. One was having a proper working in isolation or alone policy.
Yeah.
And the other was having a proper policy for orientation of new workers or young workers. Since then, because this now happened on my watch, we now are fully compliant with those two provisions. What we've also, I would hasten to add, one should not ignore what you see in front of you. You cannot unsee what you've seen. We have a need for many other WorkSafe policies. I have reached out to my colleagues with the District of Taylor, where I used to work as a CAO, and they very kindly have shared with me, with this organization, full Word and PDF copies of all of their occupational health and safety and WorkSafe materials, which is wonderful. I would have to say, though, this is not a read and replace exercise. It would be one thing to turn around and search for the words District of Taylor in all those documents and replace it with the Village of Sayward, but that's not good enough. What is actually needed is to actually work with the staff and provide them with proper orientation. But it goes further than that as well. So the monies that are earmarked at this point within the budget are to, hopefully to bring in a qualified occupational health and safety professional who would help us codify what actually really needs to be done for this size of organization. And then take those materials that I was describing to you earlier, shape them or reshape them a little bit so that they are properly addressing Sayward's requirements, because not all documents fit the same organizations, or all organizations, pardon me. And like I did last fall, sit down with the staff and go through key policies with them. So whether it's working alone or in isolation, or orientation materials for young or new workers, or it could be proper maintenance of vehicles, any number of things. What I will hasten to add, though, is that in the absence of having proper policies, it leaves the village exposed in a very bad way. And this is not something that is negotiable. This has to be addressed in order to ensure that our workers arrive at work and they go home safe. As I've said to them, one of the goals I have is making sure that every one of them goes home safe to their loved ones every day. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is customized programming around WCB, then that makes sense to me. Thank you for that answer. Thank you.
Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I went through the budget and looked at it, I saw a couple things, and it all had to do with council. And one was the, I know some of the monies aren't a big deal, but to me, I figure if we can save 30,000 is worth talking about. Travel and education for council. I realize that this year is election year, and I do feel it's very important that new councillors go to the newly elected conference that they have, so they understand what their role is as a councillor. But I don't think 22,000, I think we could probably cut that down a little bit. Another thing is last year I brought up that the honorarium for councillors, that we accept half the pay that we receive. Right now we get $220 a meeting, and I suggest that we cut that in half. Now I know it's not a lot, but it's something, and it would show responsibility to the people that are sitting here at this table, that we make the cuts where we can, where we're involved. So those are two things that I see that could be cut there. And then there's a special projects plan. It's $2,500. I'm not quite sure. Oh, page 17 of our package. It's $2,500, but I don't know what it is. We spent, projected as $78. So I'm just wondering where that is. I know it's not a lot, but $2,500 is $2,500 that we maybe don't do this year. So it's just little things. I know it's little, but there's 30,000 that I could find off the top of my head. Thank you.
May I ask, what is council special projects? Anybody know?
I would have to look into that and get back to you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. CAO.
I have,
Sounds like a special project. Just trying to lighten the mood a little.
Appreciate that. Sorry, Councillor Paulson.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I totally agree with Councillor Coates on line by line, because it's little things like that that come up and, people have a curiosity about what they are, and if you don't know, and if you don't say anything, then it just goes by the wayside. So I would put forth a proposal that we go through the spreadsheets page by page, and if we need explanation or clarification, then that can be given.
Is that your motion?
Yes. Do we need a motion for that?
I'm
I
sorry.
mean, do we need a
No.
motion for that? This,
I'm just checking. One moment, please. CAO? I'm sure Councillor Poston can't hear you.
I get, no, I can't hear.
My apologies, Councillor Paulson. I was just saying that it's not necessary for a motion to be made. I think you made your point quite clearly earlier. In the interest of providing, I would say, a more systematic flow through and examination of these documents, I've just given my copy of materials to Ms. Bradburn, and she'll go through these. And then if any member of council has any particular questions about any of the pages, let's say starting with page 12, for example, which is V1 summary, then please don't be shy. Councillor Paulson, we can't see you, so you're going to have to signal in some way to the mayor to get recognized. Thank you.
Are we looking at what's on screen or what was in our staff report?
I will align them and then what we can just do is take one at a time and see if there's any questions on it.
Page at a time.
Yeah.
Councillor Johnson, then Councillor Coates.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. I was just going to say, you know, I think page by page is appropriate, but line by line, I mean, that you're looking at an 8-hour meeting, and we've all had this in the past, right? We've been looking at this for a while. So I would say page by page, and then exploring the questions that people may have as we look at that would be ideal.
Would you like page by page with the package that you have in your?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bigger.
And it's what we've had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Page 4 of 6 of our package, your report. The significant increase is 42% just for residential, or is that 42% including the forest, the commercial, everything, or is it just going to be burdened on the taxpayer of residential homes? Sorry.
So what we're looking at is a 42% overall for property tax line. Now from that will get allocated out to the various classes. So when we looked at the slide that had the tax multiples, for example, your business, I think was 6.62. So that means your businesses will be paying a larger portion than residential. So it's not like it just goes to residential. You're going to take that 42% and then allocate it out and distribute it that way. So when we look at it, it will not be, say, like 42% just on the residential, is that as a whole. When we look at how it's impacting that average home, overall, it was $875 for the whole year for the total increase with water and sewer. So if we're looking at your package, page 12, which will align to the screen so that everyone can see the same thing. I do agree with if there's any questions per each of these pages or each of these slides, then we can address them. Depending on what the details are, we might have to look it up and then come back.
Okay, does anybody have any questions on page 12? Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, other revenue, is that, I'm just thinking about campground revenue. Where does that fall? Is that other revenue? Do we know?
Parks.
The only reason I flagged that is we did at some point look at grants in and around the expansion of the washrooms. putting in paid showers and doing pay and play for the septic, the SANI. That only makes sense if it's free or largely grant funded, but something to think about.
Thank you. On that page, 3/4 of the way down, sale of service, other is 21,000. I think that's probably could be the campground, because I know last year it was close to $20,000 in revenue.
Drill down on those items for the next meeting.
I think other revenue is also related to dog tags and business done at the office for people coming in and having copies made or things like that too.
Licenses, permits, and
We'll find out at the next meeting. We'll have them drill down on it.
And if you're looking for on page 29 of your package, you're going to see parks, and then you're going to see the breakdown. So you'll see your camping revenue come in. Yeah, so that would roll up under your sales of service other. Are there any other questions on the summary revenue? Then we'll go to the next one for summary of the operating expenditure. Okay, if there's no questions, we'll go to the next one, which is with our transfers.
Well, the one question on page 13.
Okay.
For the next one that I have is on roads. Actual was 27,986. Projected at 35,500. And 2026, we got a budget at 48,129.
I will say part of the discrepancy between the actual and projected is the actual is going to December. It doesn't have all of December included. So I would look at your projection over the actual is probably more correct. I'm just going to pull up your tab for your roads.
But even the 2026 budget is 13,000 more.
Okay, and if we look at page 25, you're going to see the breakdown of your roads. And when we here. Oh, are you comparing to actual? Actual was lower because things like your maintenance and repair end up being lower in 2025. So for example, we've had a very mild year. So like salting roads, things like that didn't happen. But if we look at a 2025 budget to 2026, they're quite comparative. So you're looking at $47,620 versus $48,129 between the 2 years. But yeah, your main areas where it's lower, you had some less staff allocated, but your main thing was your maintenance repairs as well as like your salt and sand was a lot lower this year.
Okay, thank you.
So then we can, this next one has all of our transfers to the different reserves and from reserves. If there's any questions on that. Then we'll go to page 15, which is your general revenue.
Councillor Coates.
Thank you. On page 15, the taxation if there's going to be a substantial increase in the budget for 2026, you have 891, but in 2027, it's $1 million going forward to 3030. So you say it's going to be like substantial, and then next year it's going to be 14%, and then I think you said 6% or 7%. So I'm just kind of curious as why.
Like I said, there's a variety of things when we look at from one year to the next. So generally, you're going to see a couple percent tax increase just to cover inflationary costs. Then for into 2017, there were those three items that got delayed from 2026 to bring it down from 50 to 42%. So those are now showing up in 2027 as well. And so that is why you're seeing that higher amount in 2027 and then dropping to 6% going forward after that. Keep in mind, one item I say that's not really being addressed in this year's budget that will eventually have to get addressed is on the asset management side and starting to build up reserves more to be able to cover, you know, the infrastructure that's starting to age. So we will see that in future years.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to go back to the roads line, and I believe that we have, that should be in a capital project, and it's been delayed several years. We talked about paving from, one all along Kelsey Way, and the price then was $1.3 million, I believe, but, and we deferred it to the next budget and the next budget. So is that in the capital expenditures at some point?
Hello, Councillor Polson. This is CAO Young. No, it is not. I think the key message here to be borne in mind is survival. So this budget is about survival.
It also, I mean, there's no point on paving the road until you're going to replace the infrastructure. There's no point to spending 1.3 million or 1.5 million on paving and then rip it up a couple of years later for the infrastructure and then have to repave again. That
And
doesn't
that's
make
what-
any sense.
And that's what the discussion was, to get the infrastructure, the drainage and infrastructure and the roadways all done at the same time so that it wasn't getting dug up and redone and
Right.
that sort of thing. So that was my question is it in the radar of the capital works or capital projects? Or has it just been dropped off?
It's just been dropped off at this point.
Things that get dropped off don't often come back up for later
CAO,
checking.
that doesn't matter.
Oh, I was just going to say, you know, any capital project is never fully funded. So first you'd have to find the 20 to 50% of own source funding before you can even get there. So I think it's clear here that we're in a survival mode. Certainly don't have reserve funds as stipulated. So we certainly don't have the 20 to 50% own source funds to go to that a grant would dictate that we need to have. Thank you.
I get all that, and that's not the question I'm asking about whether we've got the funds or the grants or whatever. I'm just asking is roads, which are one of the responsibilities of the municipality to provide for the people in the village. It's one of the municipal responsibilities, and I'm just asking if it is in the plan for capital improvements. And if it's just dropped off the face of the earth, whether it costs $1.3 million or $1.5 million, that's not the point. The point is that, is it carried over so that it doesn't get dropped off permanently?
Thank you, Mayor Baker.
That's my question.
So
That's my, I
within
don't need
the,
any response.
within the current budget as proposed, no, it's not. However, that work and a lot of other potential work, infrastructure work in ground and at surface, has been identified within the Village of Saywood's asset management document. That document, however, it's my understanding, is actually not been fully formalized by the village. So that is still currently in a draft form. So to Councillor Polson's point, though, it's not been forgotten. It has been documented. I will hasten to add, though, that these things, when they are not attended to, they do over time tend to accrete additional costs. This is why it's important that there be not just an asset management plan in place, but an actual infrastructure replacement strategy, and that there's prioritization is assigned to that different work. A different municipality that I led as CAO, that's what we worked on. Prior to my arrival there, they didn't have this type of documentation. Similarly to the Village of Sayward, the District of Invermere did find itself in a very difficult way with regard to it failing sewer infrastructure. And it had for many years, so again, to the point, you're not alone. This is very common across the province, where municipalities have failed to properly budget for infrastructure replacement until there's imminent failure. In that case, they had to go and borrow $5 or more million actually in order to undertake that work. Here, right now, going back to the financials here, it'll be really important to ensure that the village's financials are in good or excellent shape against the day when you may actually have to borrow money and debenture the monies that you borrowed in order to replace critical in-ground infrastructure and road surfaces at a future date. And lastly, when it comes to grants, it's important for the organization to have monies in reserve and or in general fund, so that should the day come when a grant opportunity is available that the village feels would be a really good one to pursue, that you've got the necessary matching funds available so that you're eligible to apply for the grant that you want. And we're not in that position right now.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, CEO. I believe, if I remember correctly, there's about $8 million in priority 1 and 2 listed in the AMP. And that AMP is still, I mean, it still does list every project, and that it does list a number of things that are listed as imminent failure. So yeah, there's some substantial work to be done. I don't know that anything is necessarily dropped off. It's still in that document, but it's it is a funding issue, like you said, for sure.
You have to wait till question period. We're on page 16. Oh, your microphone.
Sorry, page 15 with the different revenue options. Let's see if it will work. And we'll move to page 16. Technology. And then if there's no questions on 16, we can go to 17, which is mayor and council revenue, and then expenditures.
Councillor Coates. Doesn't matter.
In your report, it said 29% of the monies collected actually stays in the village, right? For taxation. Like the monies that is collected, it's 29% that we run our budget from. I believe you said. Because sometimes I don't think a lot of people understand this part, like how we have to pay for the SRD, school tax, hospital tax, BC assessment, municipal finance, the library, police tax. Like all that money's collected, but we're putting out like $268,000 of that. That's collected from the village is actually going to different agencies and not staying within the village.
I would have to do the calculation to see what percent actually stays here. Your taxes for your other taxing authorities are not that high. Most of the tax is the municipal portion for Sayward. But yes, you do have different taxes for other taxing authorities. So you'll have taxes for the regional district, for your hospital, BC assessment, MFA. Those are very small amounts that do get collected every year, and then they have to get passed on. But it would be more than 29% of the total tax that gets capped.
I didn't ask correctly, but on page 4 of 6 of your report, it says for 2026, revenues projected at 3 million. I'm just going to round it off. And of this amount, approximately 29% is derived from municipal taxation, 17% from fees and charges, and 54% from federal and provincial grants.
Thank you for clarifying that. So what we're looking at is revenue as a whole from the organization. So there's two separate things, and I get where it gets confused. So you receive a large amount of grant money every year being a smaller community. And so that goes into help funding like actual village costs. So that is considered part of your municipal budget. And then separately, there's the other taxing authorities, which is a lower amount. And so that's where the confusion. So that tax revenue that's coming in every single year, not the tax revenue, the grant revenue that's coming in every year is actually part of your municipal revenue. And so when we look at the total that gets taxed, it wouldn't just be the 29%. We're just sort of looking at two separate things. So if there's no questions on page 17, then we'll continue on. So now we're looking at the admin budget. The first slide is revenue. Then the next one is on the expenditure side. I'll go to expenditures. And I do apologize for everyone in the audience. That is very small.
Thank you. I noticed postage here, and I know again it's a small amount, but every dollar counts. We don't mail the Sayward News anymore, but yet the budget for 2026 going forward is still the same amount that we used this year when we did mail it out.
I do know somewhere in your budget there is savings related to that Sayward News, on the revenue side. You will see that that budget has now disappeared, but your postage, if you're sending out things like your property tax notices or your user fees, things like that, you would still have postage associated with that.
Your microphone, please.
It's the same amount as the expense for postage is the same amount as if we were doing the Sayward News. That's all.
We will make note of it and I will confirm with staff that that's correct.
Councillor Johnson.
Just a quick note, CO, I think C2C is out now. We might want to look at that as it relates to First Nations relations revenue. Thank you.
And we can move on to page 20. So this is the election. So of course, every 4 years you have an election, which is why people are seeing all the other zeros. And then what you do is you're putting 4,000 aside every year so that when it's the election year, you're just pulling that from reserve. And then that way you just keep your taxes equal over that time. We're going to page 21. So this is your recreation center. And page 22 also just continues it if there's any questions.
Just those questions that were noted earlier on some of those lines. Where was it? Office supplies, et cetera.
Okay, then moving to page 24 is RCMP. Some of the question, did I miss a question?
No, it's just a statement that we're actually making money there, so thank you very much.
To roads, page 2025. Drainage is page 26. And then sewer will be page 2027. And then water is page 28. Water.
Thank you. I'm assuming that this budget includes the, maybe a question for the CEO, but includes the parts that were requested that we have on hand to avoid a prolonged shutdown.
To Councillor Johnson through the mayor. Yes, starting last fall, we undertook a careful stock taking of various components, both of the water treatment plant as well as with the sewer system, including the lagoon. Some of you might recall that we had an electrical storm last fall, and that storm actually knocked out some of the apparatus at the lagoon. As it turns out, this is one of those. My digression actually has a point, by the way. The equipment that had been installed there was not properly protected with surge protection. This has actually been something else that we've delved into. This is kind of symptomatic of what has been going on with the Village of Sayward for many, many, many years. So working with our colleagues with H2 Ops, who is the small water and sewer consulting firm that provides some consulting support to the Village of Sayward Public Works team. We took stock of a number of different components that needed to be either upgraded or replaced or protected. For example, installing surge protection. So that is worked into this budget. I can't tease it out for you, but I can assure you that it has been worked in. It's been worked in different ways. Some of it is actually, it shows up as equipment expenditures, which would come out of, say, the water or the sewer reserve fund in some cases. And in other cases, it's being covered off by consulting fees because the electricians, for example, would be paid out of that consulting funds in order to install that equipment. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for water? I can go page 29 for parks. And then page 30 for solid waste. Moving to page 31 for public works. And page 32 for planning and building inspection.
Councillor Johnson.
Just, Mike, sorry about that. Yeah. I've just noticed the building permits revenue as opposed to the expenditures as it relates to them. I would imagine that we'll have a good look at that when we get to fees and charges. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Then page 33, emergency planning.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. And again, it looks like we're likely not filling that role. And I think that's because that's part of our working agreement with SRD now. Is that correct? We're leaning on SRD a little more for that service? Sorry.
To Councillor Johnson through the mayor. So in part, yes. I mean, there are certain responsibilities that you don't get away from as a municipality. So in the event that we had a local emergency, the SRD and the Village of Sayward would be working collaboratively, both to work on the declaration of a local emergency, but also to help coordinate the response. As I'm sure everyone here in the room knows, last year, as of January 1st last year, the Sayward Volunteer Fire Department actually became a part of the SRD. Thankfully, though, they didn't pick up and leave. So those well-trained volunteer personnel are actually still here in Sayward. And they would be the logical persons to who we would actually be turning to in many cases, depending upon the nature of the emergency. We have a very good working relationship with the emergency management personnel with the SRD as well. And as I'm sure that council members will recall, even recently, as of last week, you had endorsed a couple of resolutions. One was to formalize the lease of the fire hall number 1 to the SRD, and also provided a resolution of support for an emergency operations center grant application that the SRD is pursuing. So we work very closely with the SRD on emergency management. Okay, thank you.
So that was the last item. Just want to double check nothing came up while we were going through those. Were there any other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In previous years at budget time, we got a spreadsheet of all of the grants that we were currently operating on, and with the expenses and appropriated to certain projects. And I wonder if we could get that again so that we know how much money is left over from for instance, the community enhancement grant and the other ones, the economic development grant that are still supposedly in effect, and the money is there in reserves. If we could get a spreadsheet of what there is in those under each grant and where in 2026 some of that money would be appropriated to. That's my
The
question.
CAO has noted it. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, anybody have any questions for the CFO?
I'd just like to thank her for all of the work that she did in short order and getting this out to us. Very much appreciated.
Councillor Coates and Councillor Johnson.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to say the same thing. Thank you very much.
And I was going to echo that the way that this is put together with the details has been fantastic. So thank you for all the work, and to the CAO as well. Thank you.
One other question for you. You showed a chart that showed the last 5 years. This is, in your opinion, has this been going on longer than 5 years?
In my opinion, it has been critical for the last 5 years. Like, it's been quite evident with, in a municipality, it's not unusual to have a one-off expense, right? Something happens, something unexpected breaks, say COVID hits, there's a legal issue, whatever else, right? But they're one-off. What becomes evident, and we see the trend, is it's been 5 years in a row. And so before it has hit that 5 years, it should have been flagged of being like, okay, this is not a one-off. This is an issue, is critical to deal with. It hasn't been going on for more than 5 years. Yes. However, prior to 5 years, it was not so critical. And you're in a similar boat to a lot of other local governments. So what has happened in BC and throughout Canada is we're seeing this massive infrastructure deficit. Infrastructure got built quite often from grants back in the day. And the thing is, a lot of people go, for whatever reason, it becomes a priority of that council to go, I want to keep taxes affordable. I'm going to keep them low. And to do that, what happens is a lot of people don't start setting money aside into reserves for their eventual replacement. And they don't start really thinking about it until that point, the assets are very old and it becomes critical. That is universal throughout the country. I will say there's a lot of good things happening from the other levels of government, starting to put more pressure on local governments to become aware of the assets they have, the conditions they're in, and eventually start funding more of it so that it doesn't become so critical. But that whole process is still in progress. So like say definitely prior to 5 years, I mean, you did not have a lot of reserves set aside then. From everything that I'm understanding is still part of the 5 years when the infrastructure was still quite old and probably should have had more set aside over that whole time. But the last 5 years is where it became critical because like I say, right now, when we look at 2026, there are some one-off expenses that generally my advice would be like, that's perfect to use surplus for because we don't need to fund it ongoing. But we're not in that situation because there is no surplus. We don't have that option, right? And so at this point, our hands are very tied. And really the only thing we can look at doing is going, okay, we have to have that high property tax increase to fund it because we don't have other options. The earlier that you notice it and start acting, then you're not going to have as high of tax increases every year and you have more ability to start looking at other options. So before it becomes so critical, like you guys made the decision to go, okay, we're going to at least temporarily close our rec center. That could potentially have been addressed earlier by seeing it and going, okay, maybe there are more savings earlier. But also are there potential other steps, when we're talking about like economic development, things like that can help increase your revenue ongoing. But there's no magical way to make that happen in 1 year. That takes time. So yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you. Thanks very much for being here tonight.
You're welcome.
Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to apologize for my earlier comment when I said S disturber instead of poop disturber. So I apologize to Mayor, Council, CAO, CFO, and the people in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So do we need a motion to receive? Did not? Okay. New business, none. Public question period. For the purpose of the public question period is enable citizens to ask questions of council on each issues that are important to the question, to the citizen asking the question. Speakers are asked to limit their questions to one each, and if time permits, they'll have another opportunity to ask the second question. Citizens will state their name and their address, please.
Hi, Lee Ettinger, 220 Sayward Heights. I'd like to start by thanking Mrs. Bradburn for her extremely competent information that she provided tonight, and also to compliment our CAO for finally speaking what should have been spoken many years ago, in that the problem we're seeing here is not from the current council or the past council. It's from 3 decades of councils who exhibited unprofessional and unknowledgeable financial and administrative and operational management. We're in the mess that we're in because of that. Nobody sitting at this table or in this room or in this community is solely responsible for it, but here we are. And after having some discussions with people from the SRD, they've made it pretty clear in various kinds of statements. Things like small communities like Sayward all over this province have absolutely no business being incorporated. They cannot afford 3 levels of government. And I think what we're seeing here is an absolute verification of that. They have also said that until the residents of British Columbia have the power of recall over elected officials, that this kind of thing will continue unabated. And as you probably know, I'm involved in trying to have this village unincorporated. I know it's not popular with everybody, but you know what? We've had our professionals here, people with professional financial and accounting degrees, stand here and say, you don't have any options. No options. Each one of us is looking at $900 to $1,000 extra on our property tax this year. There's a lot of seniors who will be forced out of their homes over the period of several years because of this kind of thing. Okay. I'm not saying that becoming a part of the SRD is going to fix everything. It certainly isn't. Taxes may go down a bit, but not a lot. It's certainly never going to go down to the level that it is out in the regional district. We still have a sewer and water treatment facilities that need to be kept up. But we need to start drawing the line. I've had people say to me, well, you know, if we rejoin the regional district, the guy next door to me could be running 60 head of hogs in his backyard next week. That kind of thing is misinformation, and it's being put out all over this valley, all over this valley. By removing a level of government, we immediately save anywhere between $1.25 million and $1.5 million in operational expenses, administrative expenses. I just don't understand why we keep, you know, they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and thinking you're going to get another result. You're going to get the same result. And we've seen that for 3 decades. At any rate, we are doing our best to make sure that the citizens of this village are able to present their case to the Ministry of Municipalities and the Attorney General. And we intend to go for it. We're going to continue to push. We're doing extremely well. There are more people who are very unhappy in this village than I think you ever know about or acknowledge. A lot more. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Maureen Hazelhurst, 520 McMillan Drive. I find it absolutely incredulous that someone so indignant about legal fees, and I'm talking about Councillor Burchett, has had the audacity to ask the village, and I will quote from Exhibit G attached to an affidavit filed by the village on December 19th, 2025 in the Victoria Court Registry, an email, the exhibit was an email that he sent to the village on October 15th, I believe, and specifically item 3, asking for indemnification for myself for the censure allegations and quorum hearing. So he's complaining about the legal fees, but he wants the village to pay his. It's just absolutely ludicrous. I don't know what expectation he has that any villager would want to pay his legal fees.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, we're being attacked here. I know you like it when I get attacked, but can you please calm Maureen down? And
Maureen's already done.
I'm quite calm.
Yep. You were.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Anyone else?
I don't really have too much of a
I
question.
think
I have
when you
lots of
read,
questions. Oh, sorry.
excuse
My
me,
name
may
is,
I just say something first?
Oh.
I think the question period or public speaking is what you read, Mr. Mayor, is to be respectful. And I don't find that previous presentation respectful at all. And
Point
so,
taken.
pardon me,
Point taken.
Okay, good evening.
and
My
so
name's
you should call, it should be called off before it gets to that state. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Ellie Sampson. I live at 710 Sayward Road. I've been here 5 years, retired here, specifically spent 40 years planning to be here. Moved from 4 different communities on this island because economically I wasn't going to be able to live the rural lifestyle that I choose. So I've chosen Sayward, and every year it's getting harder and harder to stay here. I'm on a very fixed income. I've planned for this. And now when you're adding $1,000 to somebody who only makes $13,000 a year, it hurts. So again, I understand that we're in a really ugly situation financially, the city or the village, but it's unfortunate that a lot of this infighting and ugliness has brought this forward because 7, 8 years ago, I did the work. We had a great little community, financially sound, recreation center, all the things that I, as a retiree who's worked for this province for 45 years, wanted. It's not here. Thanks. I have to say, I'm looking to leave, as well as many people in this community. Sorry. Town in the making. Definitely. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay, no in camera and adjournment. The microphone is on, CAO. Thank you.
Second that for 8:03 PM.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. We are now adjourned.